The massive crystal halls of the Valerian Empire stretched across 3 entire galaxies, gleaming with power that had lasted for millions of years. Inside the grandest chamber, Emperor Nexus stood before thousands of his kind. His body shimmered with energy that could reshape reality itself. Around him, other Valerians floated in the air, their forms glowing with the same divine light. "We are not mere mortals," Emperor Nexus declared, his voice echoing through space itself. "We have conquered death. We bend reality to our will. Stars themselves bow before our power." The assembled Valerians nodded in agreement. They'd watched civilizations rise and fall while they remained eternal. They had seen planets born and destroyed while they stayed unchanged, for countless ages. The Valerians had ruled over lesser species. Every race they encountered quickly recognized their godlike abilities. Some aliens could live for hundreds of years, others had impressive technology, but none could match the Valerians' mastery over life and death. They could heal any wound, stop aging completely, and manipulate matter with just a thought. The Emperor gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing their vast empire. Across 3 galaxies, billions of creatures worship us as their rightful gods. And why shouldn't they? We possess powers they can only dream of. Suddenly a new image flickered into view, a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. The gathered Valerians barely glanced at it. They had seen thousands of such worlds before. "This is Earth," announced Lieutenant Commander Vex, stepping forward. "Our scouts report a primitive species called humans. They fight constantly among themselves. Their technology is laughably basic. They live less than 100 years before, dying of old age." Emperor Nexus studied the readings with mild interest. Humans had no psychic abilities whatsoever. Their weapons were crude metal projectiles and explosive devices. Their societies were divided into small, warring groups. They couldn't even travel between stars yet. "Perfect," the Emperor said with a slight smile. "Another species ready for enlightenment under our divine rule." The Valerians had done this countless times before. They would arrive at a primitive world, demonstrate their godlike powers, and watch as the locals immediately fell to their knees in worship. Within days, they would establish temples, create a hierarchy of priests, and begin the process of civilizing another backward species. "Commander Vex," Emperor Nexus said, turning to his lieutenant, "take a small fleet to Earth. This should require minimal effort. Show them our power, accept their worship, and establish the usual governing structure." Vex bowed deeply. "It will be done, my Emperor." "How long should I allow for complete subjugation?" "A few days at most," Nexus replied dismissively. "These humans seem particularly weak. Can't even work together as a single species. Once they see our abilities, they'll abandon their primitive beliefs and embrace us as their new gods." The other Valerians murmured their agreement. They had conquered star-spanning civilizations with advanced technology. Single primitive planet would pose no challenge whatsoever. As the assembly dispersed, Emperor Nexus gazed once more at the small blue world. Soon, billions more creatures would kneel before Valerian superiority. Earth would become another jewel in their divine crown, its inhabitants grateful servants in their cosmic empire. The Valerians began preparing their ships, confident that humanity would soon join the countless other species who had recognized their obvious godhood. After all, what could mere mortals possibly do against beings who had transcended death itself? Commander Vex's fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their ships gleaming with otherworldly light. The massive vessels hovered above major cities across the globe, casting shadows that stretched for miles. Vex himself materialized in the center of Sol, his form radiating power that made the air itself shimmer. Humans gathered in the streets. But instead of falling to their knees as expected, they pulled out strange rectangular devices and began recording. Children pointed excitedly while adults whispered among themselves. This was not the terrified worship Vex had encountered on 1,000 other worlds. "People of Earth," Vex announced, his voice booming across the city. "I am Commander Vex of the Valerian Empire. We are your gods, and we have come to guide you into a new age of enlightenment." Dr. Hyenwu pushed through the crowd, his team of scientists right behind him. Instead of cowering, he stepped forward with genuine curiosity. "Fascinating," he said, holding up a device that beeped rapidly. "The energy readings are off the charts. What kind of propulsion system do your ships use?" Vex blinked in confusion.
Oh.
No one had ever asked him about propulsion systems before. "We transcend such mundane concerns. Observe our divine power." He raised his hand, and the massive mountain visible in the distance began to rise from the earth. Tons of rock and soil lifted into the sky as if weightless. The humans gasped, but not in fear. They gasped in wonder. "Incredible!" Dr. Hyenwu shouted to his team. "Look at the gravitational field distortions. Are you getting these readings?" His colleagues frantically worked their instruments. Measuring everything they could, General Jihoon spoke into his radio from a nearby military post. "All units, maintain observation positions. I want full spectrum analysis of whatever technology they're using." This could change everything we know about physics. Vex frowned. This was not going according to plan. He decided to demonstrate more power. With a gesture, dark storm clouds gathered overhead. Lightning crackled between his fingers as he brought forth thunder and rain. "Behold," he declared, "we command the very forces of nature itself." But instead of dropping to their knees, humans opened umbrellas and pulled out more measuring devices. A young meteorologist named Sojin ran through the rain, calling out excitedly, "The atmospheric pressure changes are happening faster than should be possible. This is revolutionary." Dr. Hyenwu wiped rain from his glasses, his eyes bright with scientific excitement. "Commander Vex, is it? How exactly are you manipulating electromagnetic fields on such a massive scale? The energy requirements alone should be enormous." We are gods," Vex sputtered, growing frustrated. "We do not explain our miracles to lesser beings." "Lesser beings?" General Jihoon stepped forward, his military bearing evident despite the strange situation. "With respect, Commander, we're just trying to understand. Your technology is clearly advanced, but everything follows natural laws. We'd like to learn how you've achieved such mastery." Vex looked around at the humans gathering. In larger numbers, they weren't afraid. They weren't worshipping. They were studying him. Children drew pictures of his ships. Scientists took measurements. Military personnel observed from strategic positions, but without hostility. "This is impossible," Vex muttered, contacting his fleet. "The humans are not responding as expected. They show no recognition of our divine nature." His lieutenant's voice crackled through the communication device. "Commander, we're receiving similar reports from all landing sites. The humans are treating us like a scientific curiosity." Dr. Hyenwu approached again, this time with a tablet showing complex calculations. "Commander, we've been analyzing your energy signatures. Patterns suggest you're using some kind of quantum field manipulation. Are you familiar with our work on theoretical physics?" Vex stared at the human scientist in complete bewilderment. In all his centuries of conquest, no species had ever responded to divine demonstrations with mathematics. They usually built altars, not equations. Dr. So-Young had barely slept in 3 days. Her laboratory in the underground research facility buzzed with activity as her team worked around the clock, and analyzing every piece of data they had gathered about the Valerians. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the tables between computer screens showing complex wave patterns and energy readings. "Look at this," she called to her colleague Minho, pointing at a series of measurements on her screen. Every time Commander Vex lifted that mountain, the energy signature spiked at exactly the same frequency. And when he created those storms, the electromagnetic patterns repeated in identical sequences. Minho leaned over her shoulder, studying. "The data, you're right. If these were truly divine powers, we'd expect random or chaotic patterns. But this looks like technology following programmed instructions." Dr. So-Young nodded excitedly. "Exactly. And notice how his abilities seem to weaken in certain atmospheric conditions. During that thunderstorm yesterday, his power output dropped by 30% when the humidity hit specific levels. Meanwhile, in a hidden bunker across the city, Colonel Tejo studied satellite images of Valerian positions. His weathered face showed the strain of planning humanity's response to beings who claimed to be gods. Around him, soldiers from different nations worked together, their usual rivalries forgotten in the face of this new threat. The Valerians have established 3 main bases, Tejo explained to his officers. They're positioned exactly like a traditional military occupation force. If they were truly divine, why would they need supply lines and communication networks? Lieutenant Wu Jin, a young communications specialist, looked up from his equipment. Colonel, we've been monitoring their transmissions. They're using some kind of advanced technology, but it still follows the basic principles of radio communication. We might be able to disrupt it. Tejo smiled grimly. Good. If they need to communicate like everyone else, they can be cut off like everyone else. That night, the first human resistance operation began. Small teams moved through the darkness, avoiding Valerian patrols with tactics learned from decades of human warfare. They targeted not the aliens themselves, but the strange devices that had appeared around their landing sites. Sergeant Dongman led his squad through the sewers beneath the city, emerging near a Valerian communication array. Remember, he whispered. To his team, we're not trying to defeat gods. We're disabling alien technology. They planted explosive charges and vanished back into the tunnels before the Valerians could respond. Similar operations occurred simultaneously across the globe, coordinated by resistance cells that had formed spontaneously when governments initially tried to negotiate with the invaders. The results were immediate and shocking. Valerian forces suddenly found themselves unable to communicate with their ships. Their perfect coordination broke down as different units lost contact with each other. Commander, Vex stood in his command center, staring at blank screens where his tactical displays should have been. This is impossible, he muttered. How can primitives interfere with our divine technology? Lieutenant reported. More disturbing news. Commander, our supply convoys are being attacked. The humans aren't engaging us directly. They strike the transport vehicles and disappear before we can retaliate. Dr. Saw-Young's research had spread to resistance cells worldwide. Scientists shared their findings about Valerian weaknesses, while military leaders adapted their strategies accordingly. They discovered that the aliens' overconfidence was their greatest vulnerability. The Valerians expected humans to either worship them or fight them in traditional battles. Instead, they faced hit-and-run tactics that targeted their infrastructure. Power stations that fed their bases mysteriously exploded. Communication towers collapsed in the night. Supply routes became death traps. Young hacker Kung Min worked from a basement computer lab, infiltrating networks that the Valerians had assumed were too primitive to threaten them. Their systems are advanced, she reported to Colonel Tejo, but they're not designed to defend against our kind of chaos. As days passed, small victories accumulated. A Valerian patrol trapped in a tunnel system. Supply depot destroyed by creative use of industrial chemicals. Communication blackouts that lasted hours, for the first time in their eternal existence. The Valerians began to feel something they had never experienced before. Doubt. Minho hadn't left his laboratory in 48 hours. Empty food containers surrounded his workstation as he analyzed the latest data from Valerian encounters. His bloodshot eyes focused on a pattern that had been nagging at him for days. Dr. So-Young, come look at this immediately, he called urgently. His colleague rushed over, nearly tripping over cables in her haste. What is it? She asked, settling beside him at the cluttered desk. Minho pointed to a series of graphs on his screen. Remember when Commander Vex couldn't lift that building during the rainstorm last week? I thought it was just coincidence, but look at these atmospheric readings. The data showed clear correlations between weather conditions and Valerian power levels. When humidity exceeded 70%, their abilities weakened significantly. When atmospheric pressure dropped below specific thresholds, their reality-bending powers became unstable. It's not just weather, Minho continued, pulling up more files. Their powers also fluctuate based on electromagnetic interference.
When?
That solar flare hit 2 days ago. 3 separate Valerian units reported equipment failures. Dr. So-young's eyes widened as she understood the implications. They're not gods at all. They're using technology that depends on specific environmental conditions. Within hours, her team had developed a plan. If Valerian abilities required precise atmospheric conditions, then humans could create environments where those conditions didn't exist. They called it Operation Dead Zone. The first test came sooner than expected. A Valerian patrol approached. A resistant stronghold in the mountains, led by Subcommander Crane, who had boasted about his invincibility to captured humans. But Colonel Tejo was ready. His engineers had modified industrial equipment to create massive electromagnetic fields. Around the area, chemical dispersal units altered the local atmospheric composition, while underground networks of generators produced specific frequency interference. When Subcommander Crane tried to demonstrate his power by moving a massive boulder, nothing happened. He strained, his form flickering with unstable energy, but the rock remained motionless. "What is this?" Crane demanded, panic creeping into his voice for the first time in centuries. Sergeant Dongman stepped out from behind cover, his weapon trained on the confused alien. "This is what happens when gods meet science," he said calmly. The Valerian tried to flee but found he couldn't even levitate properly. His usual ability to phase through solid matter had completely failed. For the first time in his existence, he was trapped and vulnerable. Similar incidents occurred across the globe as human resistance cells implemented Dr. So-young's countermeasures. Valerian forces found themselves powerless in areas where humans had altered the environment. Industrial facilities were converted into weapon systems that created dead zones where alien technology simply stopped working. Engineer UNG worked frantically in an abandoned factory, coordinating with teams worldwide. "The frequency disruptors are working better than expected," she reported to Resistance headquarters. "We're seeing 90% power reduction in targeted areas." Commander Vex stood in his command center, watching reports pour in from across the planet. His forces were being systematically neutralized by creatures he had dismissed as primitive. The impossible was happening. Humans were somehow canceling divine power itself. With trembling hands, he activated his communication system to contact Emperor Nexus. The connection crackled with interference, another sign of human tampering. "My Emperor," Vex began hesitantly, "I must report a disturbing development. The humans have found a way to neutralize our abilities." Emperor Nexus's image flickered on the screen, his expression showing disbelief. "Impossible or eternal. Beings with power over reality itself.
Oh.
No mortal species can affect our divine nature. But they have, my Emperor. Entire regions of Earth have become dead zones where our technology fails. Our soldiers are being captured by beings who should be our servants." The Emperor's confident expression began to crack. "You must be mistaken. Perhaps you underestimated their primitive weapons. No, my Emperor. They're not fighting us with weapons. They're fighting us with ... with science. They've turned our own power against us." For the first time in millions of years, Emperor Nexus felt something he had forgotten existed: uncertainty. If humans could neutralize Valerian abilities, what did that say about their supposed divinity? The foundation of everything the Valerians believed about themselves was beginning to crumble. One dead zone at a time, Captain Donghain crouched behind a concrete barrier, studying the Valerian facility through his binoculars. The massive structure pulsed with alien energy, its crystalline walls reflecting the morning sun. Intelligence reports indicated this was a key communication hub that coordinated Valerian operations across the entire continent. "Remember," he whispered to his team of 20 soldiers, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. Every person on Earth is counting on us to shut down their network." The assault began at dawn. Donghain's forces moved through the dead zone his engineers had created, knowing the Valerians inside would be operating at reduced power. What they discovered inside the facility changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemies. As the first explosions rocked the building, Donghain watched something incredible happen. The Valerian guards didn't charge forward to defend their position. Instead, they retreated deeper into the facility, desperately seeking cover and protection. "They're running away," reported Sergeant Kiwu over the radio, disbelief clear in his voice. "The Valerians are actually hiding from us." Dong Hyan pressed forward, his team clearing room after room. Each time they encountered Valerian personnel, the aliens would immediately surrender rather than risk injury. These beings who claimed to be gods were terrified of getting hurt in the facility's central chamber. They found Subcommander Thyron cowering behind a control panel. When Dong Hin approached, the Valerian's eyes showed pure terror. "Please," Duran begged, his voice shaking, "don't harm me. I am eternal. I cannot die. I must not die." Dong Hayan stared at the alien in amazement. "You're immortal, but you're afraid of death? You don't understand?" Thyron replied desperately. "I have lived for thousands of years. I've seen empires rise and fall. I cannot lose all of that. Cannot risk my eternal existence." The human captain began to understand. These beings had lived so long that they had become paralyzed by the fear of losing their immortality. They couldn't take risks because they had too much to lose. Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Private Wu Jin had been separated from his squad and badly wounded. His leg was broken, and he was losing blood fast as he dragged himself. Through a corridor, he heard crying coming from a sealed room inside. He found a group of Valerian civilians, engineers, and technicians who had been trapped when the human attack began. They huddled together, terrified and helpless. Despite his injuries, Wu Jin didn't hesitate. "It's okay," he said gently, using the translator device all human soldiers carried. "I'm going to get you out of here." The Valerians stared at him in confusion. But we are your enemies," one of them stammered. "You're not soldiers," Wu Jin replied, struggling to stand. "You're just people trying to survive." He spent precious minutes helping them find a safe exit route, even though staying meant he might be captured or killed. His own team was calling for him on the radio, but he refused to leave the civilians behind. When Captain Dong Hayan finally found Wu Jin, the young soldier was barely conscious, but smiling. "Sir," he whispered, "I got them out. The civilians are safe." Word of Wu Jin's actions spread quickly through the Valerian ranks. The aliens couldn't comprehend why a mortal being would risk his short life to save strangers. Their immortal minds struggled to process such behavior. "Oh, this makes no sense," Subcommander Thrawn muttered as he was led away in restraints. "Why would he sacrifice himself for us? His life is already so brief." Similar stories began emerging from battlefields across Earth. Humans threw themselves on grenades to save their comrades. Medics ran into danger to treat wounded enemies. Parents sacrificed themselves to protect children who weren't even their own. The Valerians had lived for millennia, but they had never truly understood courage. They had power, but they had forgotten what it meant to be brave. Their immortality had become their greatest weakness. Back in the Valerian command ship, the reports troubled Commander Vex deeply. How can beings who live less than a century be braver than those who are eternal? He asked his officers. No one had an answer. The fundamental assumptions about divine superiority were crumbling with each act of human courage. They witnessed. General Zorth studied the tactical reports with growing frustration. His immortal warriors, beings who had conquered countless worlds, were being outmaneuvered by creatures who lived less than a century. The humans' guerrilla tactics had proven devastatingly effective, and now he needed to adapt or face complete defeat. "We must learn from them," he declared to his assembled officers in the command chamber. "If humans can use hit-and-run tactics, so can we. If they can sacrifice themselves for victory, we must do the same." The Valerian forces began attempting to copy human strategies. They tried to set up ambushes, but their immortal minds couldn't accept the uncertainty that came with guerrilla warfare. When human patrols approached their positions, the Valerians would reveal themselves too early. Desperate to avoid any real danger, Lieutenant Vex watched his squad attempt a supposed suicide mission against a human stronghold. But when the moment came to press forward into actual danger, every Valerian soldier hesitated. Their survival instincts, honed over millennia of existence, simply wouldn't allow them to risk their eternal lives. I cannot do it," admitted Captain Marine, his weapon trembling in his hands. If I die here, I lose everything. Thousands of years of existence, gone forever. General Zorth realized with growing horror that his forces were paralyzed by their own immortality. They had become so attached to their eternal existence that they couldn't function as effective warriors when faced with beings who embraced mortality. Meanwhile, in hidden laboratories across Earth, Dr. Minho's teams worked frantically to reverse engineer captured Valerian technology. They had salvaged pieces of alien equipment from destroyed facilities and were discovering that the advanced systems could be understood and modified. "Look at this," Minho called to his colleague, holding up a crystalline device that pulsed. With inner light, their power sources operate on quantum energy manipulation, but the basic principles are similar to our fusion reactors. We can adapt this. Within weeks, human engineers had created hybrid weapons that combined Valerian energy technology with human innovation. The results were devastating. Laser weapons that could cut through Valerian shields, energy fields that could disrupt their communication systems, defensive barriers that could withstand their reality-bending attacks. Engineer Yunji worked around the clock in her converted factory, leading a team that was developing new defensive systems. "We don't need to match their power," she explained to her exhausted team. "We just need to be smarter about how we use our own." Her innovations included portable dead zone generators that could neutralize Valerian abilities on demand, mobile shield systems that protected human forces from energy attacks, and most importantly, communication networks that couldn't be disrupted by alien interference. Across the planet, strategist Kiangsu coordinated resistance networks that spanned continents. His background in military logistics proved invaluable, as he organized supply lines, coordinated attacks, and managed intelligence networks that kept human forces one step ahead of their enemies. "The key is unpredictability," he explained during a global resistance meeting conducted through encrypted channels. "The Valerians think in terms of centuries and millennia. We think in terms of days and hours. That's our advantage." The tide of war began to shift dramatically. Human forces, equipped with hybrid weapons and protected by new defensive systems, started pushing Valerian forces back from key positions. The aliens' technological superiority meant nothing when humans refused to fight, according to their expectations, reports flooded into Valerian command centers about retreating forces and abandoned positions. Commanders who had ruled for thousands of years found themselves outmaneuvered by human leaders who were young enough to be their descendants' descendants. "This is impossible," General Zorth muttered, staring at tactical displays that showed red zones spreading across Earth's surface. "We are divine beings. We should not be losing to mortals." But the evidence was undeniable. Valerian forces were retreating on multiple fronts. Their mighty empire, built over millions of years, was being challenged by creatures they had dismissed as insects. The foundation of their civilization was cracking under pressure from beings who refused to accept their limitations. The supposedly inferior humans were proving that gods could be defeated by mortals who simply refused to bow down. The sky above, Earth darkened as Emperor Nexus himself descended from the heavens. His massive form blazed with power that had remained untested for millions of years. The Valerian ruler had grown tired of watching his forces fail against mere mortals, and now he would personally end this embarrassing rebellion. Enough. His voice boomed across continents, causing earthquakes with each word. "I will show these insects what true divine power looks like." With a gesture of his hand, entire mountain ranges began to shift and crumble. The Pacific Ocean swirled into massive whirlpools as Emperor Nexus reshaped the planet's surface according to his will. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds, populations evacuated just moments before by desperate human forces. In underground bunkers worldwide, resistance leaders watched in horror as satellite feeds showed the destruction. Whole coastlines were disappearing. Rivers changed course with a wave of the Emperor's hand. Very continents seemed to bend to his will. "This is beyond anything we've faced," Colonel Tejo reported from his bunker beneath Seoul. "Our countermeasures are useless against this level of power." But Dr. Hyenwu refused to give up. While others watched the destruction in despair, he studied the energy readings from the Emperor's attacks. His tired eyes focused on patterns that others had missed. "Wait," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the chaos in the command center. "Look at these energy spikes. They're not random." His team gathered around the monitoring equipment as Dr. Hyenwu pointed to specific readings. "The Emperor's power isn't unlimited. It's being amplified by something. These energy signatures show regular pulses from fixed locations." Working frantically, his team triangulated the sources of the amplification signals. Hidden across the globe were quantum amplifiers, ancient Valerian devices that had been secretly installed over the centuries. They were the source of Emperor Nexus's seemingly godlike abilities. "He's not actually reshaping reality," Dr. Hyenwu explained excitedly. "He's using a network of amplifiers to channel massive amounts of energy. If we can destroy them simultaneously..." Implications were staggering. Emperor Nexus wasn't truly divine. He was just using technology so advanced that it appeared magical. But technology could be destroyed. Coordinator J1 took control of the global resistance network. His voice crackled through encrypted channels to cells on every continent. "This is our only chance," he said calmly. "We have one shot to take down the amplifier network before the Emperor realizes what we're doing." The plan required perfect timing. Teams of volunteers would have to reach each amplifier site simultaneously, knowing that many wouldn't survive the mission. As Emperor Nexus concentrated his attention on what he believed was humanity's last stronghold in the Himalayas, human forces would strike at the true source of his power. In Tokyo, engineer Yuki-san led her team through collapsing subway tunnels toward an amplifier hidden beneath the city. "Remember," she shouted over the sound of crumbling concrete, "we only get one chance. If we fail, there won't be another opportunity." Similar scenes played out across the globe. In London, resistance fighters battled through streets that shifted like liquid as reality warped around them. In New York, a team of scientists raced against time to reach an amplifier before the building, housing it dissolved into energy. Young. Hacker Biora worked from a mobile command center, coordinating the attacks through quantum-encrypted communications. "Teams are in position," she reported to J1. "Amplifiers located in 47 cities worldwide are ready for simultaneous strike." Above them, Emperor Nexus raised his arms to deliver what he believed would be the final blow to human resistance. Mountains rose from the earth to crush the last human stronghold. The ocean itself seemed to bend toward the sky as reality twisted around his will. In 30 seconds, J1's voice reached every strike team simultaneously. "We either save our world or watch it die. For humanity." Volunteers checked their equipment one final time. They knew most of them wouldn't survive the next few minutes. But they also knew that failure meant the end of everything they had fought for. The most desperate gambit in human history was about to begin. The synchronized explosions occurred within milliseconds of each other across the globe. From hidden bunkers beneath major cities to remote mountain installations, human strike teams detonated their charges simultaneously. The ancient quantum amplifiers that had powered Valerian dominance for millennia erupted in brilliant flashes of light. Emperor Nexus felt the change instantly. The mountains he had been lifting began to crash back to Earth. The ocean waters he had bent to his will collapsed in massive waves. His reality-shaping powers flickered like a dying flame.
Oh, what?
What is happening?" He gasped, his voice no longer booming with divine authority but trembling with confusion. For the first time in millions of years, Emperor Nexus felt something he had forgotten existed: weakness. His immortal form began to solidify, becoming heavy and clumsy. The energy that had surrounded him for eons faded, leaving him standing on solid ground like any ordinary being. His hands shook as he tried to summon his power. But nothing happened. Dr. So-Young emerged from the resistance bunker, her team of scientists behind her. She had spent months studying Valerian technology. Now she faced the being who had claimed to be the ultimate god of the universe. "You're afraid?" she observed, watching Emperor Nexus stumble as he tried to retreat. "You're actually afraid of us. I am Emperor Nexus, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I am eternal. I am divine. This cannot be happening. Dr. Soyoung stepped closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming any fear she might have felt. You're not divine. You're just very old and very advanced. But you made a crucial mistake. You forgot what it means to be truly alive. The Emperor's eyes showed panic as he realized his powerlessness. My abilities, my immortality. I cannot die. I must not die. I have existed for longer than your species has drawn breath. That's exactly the problem. Dr. Soyoung replied gently. You've lived so long that you've forgotten how to live. You've become so afraid of death that you've stopped truly existing. Around the world, other Valerians felt their enhanced abilities failing as the amplifier network collapsed. Some tried desperately to restore their godlike status, but the damage was irreversible. The foundation of their superiority had been built on technology, not divinity. Commander Vex stood in his disabled command ship, watching his screens go dark, one by one. His soldiers looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. The impossible had happened. Mortals had defeated gods. His lieutenant asked, voice filled with uncertainty. Vex thought of the humans he had fought, particularly the young medic who had saved Valerian civilians during the facility assault. We learn, he said quietly. We learn what it means to be mortal. Many Valerians couldn't accept this new reality. Ships began departing Earth's orbit, carrying those who refused to abandon their illusions of godhood. They fled to distant stars, hoping to rebuild their empire elsewhere, but their confidence was shattered forever. Others, however, chose to stay. Commander Vex approached the human resistance leaders with a proposal that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. We request asylum, he said, the word strange in his mouth. We wish to learn from you, to understand what we have lost in our pursuit of immortality. Dr. Hyanwu, who had studied Valerian technology for months, was the first to extend. His hand we can teach you, he said. But you'll have to start by accepting that you're not gods. You're just people like us. Emperor Nexus sat in a human detention facility, staring at his reflection in a mirror. His face showed age lines that hadn't been there before. His eyes held confusion and fear instead of divine confidence. I don't understand, he whispered to Dr. Soyoung during one of their sessions. How can beings who live such brief lives be stronger than those who are eternal? Because, she explained patiently, knowing that life is limited makes every moment precious. You had infinite time, so you never learned to value it. We have short lives, so we make every day count. News of the Emperor's defeat spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. Countless species who had worshipped the Valerians. As gods learned that their divine rulers were just advanced beings with powerful technology, the impossible had become reality. Mortals had brought down gods, not through superior power, but through courage, sacrifice, and the refusal to accept their predetermined fate. The galaxy would never be the same. 5 years had passed since the fall of Emperor Nexus, and the galaxy looked completely different. Dr. Hyanwu walked slowly through the corridors of the International Space Research Station, his hair now silver, and his steps more careful than they used to be. Age had caught up with him, but his eyes still sparkled with the same curiosity that had helped defeat the Valerians. Keth, are you ready for today's experiment? He called to his research partner, a former Valerian scientist who had chosen to stay on Earth after the war. Keth looked up from his work, his once glowing form now dimmed to a more human-like appearance. The former immortal had learned to age gracefully, something that would have horrified him years ago. Yes, Dr. Hyanwu. I believe we're close to a breakthrough in quantum healing technology. Your laboratory was a symbol of the new galaxy. Humans and reformed Valerians worked side by side, sharing knowledge that had once been hoarded by the self-proclaimed gods. The cure for cancer they were developing would help both species, along with dozens of others across the star systems. No, Keth said thoughtfully. When I was immortal, I never truly understood the value of time. Every day was the same as the last. But now, knowing that my time is limited, each discovery feels precious. Dr. Hyanwu smiled, adjusting his glasses. That's what we tried to tell you during the war. Mortality isn't a curse. It's what makes life meaningful. Through the station's windows, they could see Earth's first interstellar colony ship preparing for departure. The massive vessel carried 50,000 volunteers from dozens of species. All united by humanity's vision of equality and cooperation, Captain Sujin. Now a respected interstellar explorer addressed the mixed crew over the ship's communication system. "We're not going to these new worlds as conquerors," she announced. "We're going as friends and teachers. Every species we meet will be treated with respect and dignity." Dr. Wu Jin, the same soldier who had saved Valerian civilians during the war, now served as the expedition's chief medical officer. He had spent years learning alien biology from reformed Valerian scientists, combining their knowledge with human compassion. "The most important thing we've learned," he told his mixed-species medical team, "is that every life has value, no matter how long or short it might be." Back on Earth, former Emperor Nexus had become something unthinkable: a teacher. In a small classroom, filled with young humans and Valerians, he shared stories of his ancient mistakes. "I ruled for millions of years," he told his students, his voice now gentle rather than commanding. "But I never truly lived until I learned to accept my mortality. Power without wisdom is just destruction waiting to happen." One young student, a human girl named Hei Wan, raised her hand. "But weren't you sad to give up your immortality?" Nexus considered the question carefully. "I thought I would be. But I've learned that meaning comes from what we create, not how long we exist. In my 5 years as a mortal, I've done more good than in my millions of years as a god." Across the galaxy, former Valerian territories had been transformed into thriving democracies. Species that had once been enslaved now governed themselves, guided by human advisors who emphasized cooperation over domination. Commander Vex, now serving as an ambassador between worlds, often reflected on the changes. "Called ourselves gods," he said during a Galactic Council meeting, "but we were just prisoners of our own fear. Humans taught us that true divinity comes from serving others, not ruling them." The message had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Advanced civilizations that had once competed for dominance now worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The Andromedan Research Collective was developing new forms of sustainable energy. The Centauri Medical Alliance was eliminating diseases that had plagued species for millennia. Dr. So Young, now leading the Galaxy Health Initiative, often spoke about the transformation. "We learned that the greatest discoveries aren't new technologies," she would say. "They're new ways of thinking about ourselves and each other." As humanity's influence spread, they carried a simple philosophy: every being, regardless of their abilities or lifespan, had something valuable to contribute. The real gods weren't those who claimed divine power, but those who used their limited time to lift others toward their potential. The galaxy had found its new pantheon. It's not in immortal rulers, but in mortal souls who dared to dream beyond their limitations.